Genesis chapter 17, when God is speaking to Abram, says, "You shall no longer be called Abram, but your name shall be Abraham, for I have made you a father of many nations." Now, I need you to understand this for a moment. Abram is old. Sarai, or Sarah as she becomes known, is old. And it's not a knock on anyone. It's just they're too old to physically have children. And people lived a long time in the Bible. You guys probably know that. But they're too old to physically have children. They don't have any children yet. But God is promising Abraham that you will be the father of many nations. Now, how are you going to be the father of many nations if you don't even have one child? That's how a lot of us would respond to this. If God spoke to us and said, "You're going to be the father of many nations," we would say, I don't even have one kid. What are you talking about? How can I be the father of many nations? How can I be the mother of many nations? Or we would do what a lot of Christians do. A lot of Christians, they'll take a promise from God and they'll kind of twist it, and they'll say, "Well, I'll be the father of many nations because I'll have influence over many people, and I'll have spiritual sons and daughters over many different people." No, that's not what God promised. That's beautiful. That's awesome. But you're downgrading God's promise. You're downgrading what He said. And so maybe you've been given a promise that your children are going to be in the ministry, that your children are going to be missionaries, that they're going to be pastors, that they're going to be evangelists. And you say, "Well, we're all ministers, and I believe that my children, they're going to be saved and they're going to be good Christians." No, you're downgrading the promise. I believe that. I believe we can all be minister in our lives, and I believe it's great that your children are Christians. That's awesome. But if you've been given a promise, don't downgrade God's promises. Don't take less from God than He's promised you. And that's what many of us do. So we would look at this and we would say, "Well, God, you've made me a promise to be the father of many nations, and I just believe that I'm going to influence many people, and they're going to look at me as a second father, or they're going to look at me as a spiritual father." No, Abraham, you're literally going to be the father of many nations. One day there are going to be millions of people that can trace their lineage back to you. But right now, you don't have any children. Right now, it seems impossible to have children. It's not like he's 25 years old and Sarah's 26 and they're just getting started in life and they're both perfectly healthy. No, that's not what this is. It seems the natural circumstances seem like there is no way that this is going to happen. But that's how every miracle is. That's how every breakthrough is. Come on, when God is in it, if you can figure it out on your own, then there's no reason for God to step in. If Abraham could have just had a bunch of sons, this was thousands of years ago, sons and daughters, of course he would be the father of many nations because this was thousands of years ago. And of course they would spread and they would multiply. And yeah, that's easy. That's just natural. That's just human life. So why would God have to step in? If you're believing by faith, if you're believing for the promises of God, God's promises are going to be big. God's promises are going to seem impossible. Come on, some of you, God has promised you that you're going to launch a multi-location, a multi-million-dollar business, that you're going to have all these employees, that you're going to affect people, that you're going to be able to give money to the kingdom. And right now, you don't even have enough credit to get a credit card. You don't even have enough credit to get a vehicle. I've been there. Come on, I know that. I couldn't even get a vehicle. Me and my wife, we didn't had no credit. No credit. God, this seems impossible, but God is in the business of the impossible. If it's not impossible, you don't need God. If you can do it on your own, if you can just go get the loan, if you can just go make the connections, you don't need God. You don't need faith. Faith is for things that seem impossible, seem like there's no way that it can happen, seem like this is the last effort, this is the last option that we can have. There's no other way that it will happen other than God. That's when God likes to step in. That's when God likes to step in. I'm sure in our story about the centurion, I'm sure the centurion had doctors come talk to or come evaluate his servant. He was a wealthy man. We understand that from the scripture. He had influence. He would have had access because of the Roman government. He would have had access to the best medicine of the day, the best doctors of the day, the best healthcare of the day, which we know it wasn't the best, but the best of the day. He would have had access to all of that. And so I'm sure he had done all those other options. He had seen, okay, can I just take care of my servant on my own? Can I just do this on my own? But no, it said his servant was ready to die. So this was the last option. There were no other options. No other doctors could fix it. So don't consider the natural circumstances. Some of you, God's calling you to ministry right now. This is the story for me and my wife right now. God called us to launch into a new ministry, to launch something new, and we're still praying and fasting and figuring out all what it's going to look like and what God's going to do with it. But it did not make sense in the natural circumstances. We love the church that we were a part of. We love the people that we got to pastor. We got to work in the ministry. We got to work in our giftings. We were taken care of financially. We were financially stable. All of these different things. It didn't make sense in the natural to leave those things when, hey, this is good. Like, we're enjoying this. This is great. God's called us here. This is awesome. But then God begins to lead us, and it's like, this doesn't make sense in the natural. God, this doesn't make sense. What you have called us to do, I have dreams in my heart to reach people online, to reach people, and I have dreams that are so much bigger and seem unfathomable right now. I have dreams that God has given me, promises that He's placed in my heart that seem crazy. They seem crazy right now, but I have faith. I know God's already done it. I know God's already taken care of it, that when the time comes, when we need to expand, when we need a larger studio, when we need more financing, when we need more people, when we need editors, and when we need production people, that I believe God's already done it. God's already taken care of it. This is the type of faith that you have to have. I preached a sermon several years ago about how God will give other people a dream right now so that you can work together in the future. The illustration that I used is James Cameron, who's one of my favorite directors and producers. Of course, did the Titanic, then he did the movie Avatar. But the movie Avatar, which when it came out was like the most expensive movie, it just had all this new technology. That was actually the first film that he ever wrote and had a dream for. I believe he was 19 in his childhood bedroom. Before he had any experience in the film industry, he had this dream for Avatar. And I'm not saying God gave him that dream necessarily. I'm just saying he had this dream for Avatar. But he knew he didn't have the money, he didn't have the experience, and even the technology, the CGI, the technology that he needed to accomplish this type of film had not yet been created. And so he held on to that movie, to that screenplay, that script, for years. I think it was like 30 years, 20 years before they actually started production. But what I thought was so incredible is the same time when he's waiting on the technology, there's someone else that has a dream to invent a computer, to invent CGI technology, to invent filming technology, to where one day they would be able to create Avatar the way that it was in James Cameron's heart. And so I believe that for our ministry, I believe that God is putting people in situations right now, that there are people learning skills right now. There are people making connections right now, that it is happening right now. Even though I don't see it yet, even though God hasn't revealed it to me yet, it's happening right now. I have faith. I know that God is, there's people that are learning how to edit videos right now. There's people that are learning live streaming right now. There's people that are learning how to put on events and how to do events around the country and around the world, and how to deal with different codes and different countries. I know that God is doing those things right now because He's put it inside of me, and I know He's going to bring other people along one day. And you're saying, man, Pastor Alex, that seems crazy. That's the point. That's the point. Everything that God calls you to do is going to be crazy. If you don't think it's crazy, if it doesn't seem too big for you, you need to think bigger. If you've downgraded what God's called you to do to where you can just handle it and you can just manage it, I want to encourage you, dream bigger. Think bigger, because if God calls you to it, it's going to be crazy. It's going to seem wild. Abraham, he left his family. He left what he knew. He left wealth. He left inheritance to go to where God would show him. He didn't know where he was going. God didn't give him every step. He just said, leave. And then he just said, I will show you one day. And I'm going to make you the father of many nations. Even though you don't have any children right now, I'm going to make you the father of many nations. Think about how crazy that is. But God calls us to do crazy things. So don't think about the circumstances. Don't think about the circumstances. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you.